The champagne bubbled like my marriage. Pretty on the surface, but mostly hot air rising to the top. I stood in the center of the Heron Gallery, surrounded by overpriced paintings and overpaid people, watching my wife Elin work the room like she owned it. Which, technically, she did. We both did. For now. Miles, darling, you look positively thrilled to be celebrating another year of life, said Marcy Kellerman, the art world's answer to a gossip magazine. Her voice carried that particular brand of fake sweetness that made my teeth ache. Nothing says happiness like being surrounded by fakes on your birthday, I replied, gesturing at the paintings. Though I didn't expect so many of them to be walking around. Marcy's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Oh, you're terrible. Elin is so lucky to have a husband with such a sense of humor. Lucky? Right. If she only knew what I'd discovered 3 weeks ago, she might reconsider that assessment. But tonight wasn't about what Marcy knew or didn't know. Tonight was about timing. The gallery hummed with conversation, the kind of pretentious chatter that made me remember why I'd wanted to authenticate art instead of selling it. At least when I examined a painting's provenance, I was dealing with honest lies, forgeries that didn't pretend to be anything other than what they were, once you knew how to look. Ladies and gentlemen, Ellen's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She stood near the main display, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, her smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The crowd turned toward her, wine glasses raised in anticipation. I found myself moving closer, drawn by the same magnetic pull that had attracted me to her 8 years ago, before I learned that magnetism could repel just as easily as it attracted. Tonight, we're celebrating my wonderful husband, Miles, on his 41st birthday, she continued, her eyes finding mine across the room. A man who has finally learned his place in this world. The crowd chuckled appreciatively. Several people raised their glasses higher. I saw Tanner, my half-brother, grinning near the back wall like he was watching his favorite comedy show. He'd always enjoyed watching me squirm. Miles has spent years thinking he knew everything about art, about business, about life, Elin went on, her voice carrying easily through the space. But this past year, he's discovered the beauty of letting others take the lead, of stepping back and letting more capable hands guide our little empire. More laughter. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly what I'd expected, what I'd planned for. So, here's to my husband. Elin raised her champagne flute, and the crowd followed suit. Who finally learned his place. The cheering erupted immediately. Marcy clapped enthusiastically. Simone Reeves, another gallery owner and Elin's supposed friend, laughed loud enough to be heard over everyone else. Tanner actually whooped. I smiled, raised my own glass, and waited for the noise to die down just enough. And to my ex-wife, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet, who will learn hers when the judge reviews these financial records tomorrow? The silence that followed was beautiful, absolute, perfect. Ellen's face went through several interesting color changes, settling somewhere between pale and green. Tanner's grin vanished so quickly I wondered if he'd pulled a muscle. Marcy's champagne glass actually trembled in her hand. I'm sorry. What did you say? Elin's voice had lost its confident edge. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. I said the judge will be very interested in these financial records, particularly the quarterly wire transfers. $340,000 is a lot of money to send to Barcelona, don't you think? The envelope felt heavy in my hand, weighted with 3 weeks of private investigator fees, forensic accounting, and careful documentation. Carson Riley, the ex-cop I'd hired, had been thorough, painfully, beautifully thorough. Miles, what are you talking about? But Elin's voice cracked on the last word, and I saw her eyes dart toward Tanner. Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, opening the envelope and pulling out the top photograph. But maybe your friends would like to know about Elena Venton. That is what you call yourself in Spain, isn't it? I held up the photo. Ellen walking hand in hand with a dark-haired man outside a Barcelona cafe. A small boy and girl running ahead of them. The timestamp showed it was taken 6 months ago, during one of her supposed business trips. The silence stretched tighter. Someone's glass actually hit the floor, the sound sharp in the quiet. Those are beautiful children, by the way, I continued conversationally. 9 and 7 years old, according to their school records. Damon must be very proud. Ellen's mask finally slipped completely. Miles, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? Because I think the embarrassing part is just getting started. I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. Did you all know that my wife has been living a double life? 6 months here, 6 months in Spain, playing house with her boyfriend and their 2 children? Marcy gasped audibly. Simone's mouth fell open. The other guests began murmuring among themselves, the sound building like a gathering storm. That's enough, Ellen snapped, but her authority had evaporated. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. You're right, I agreed. It is enough. 8 years of enough. I tucked the photograph back into the envelope. The divorce papers were filed this morning. The asset freeze goes into effect Monday, and the FBI will be very interested in your little art authentication business. I started walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Elin, you might want to call Damon. I have a feeling Spanish authorities are going to have some questions about Elena Venton's immigration status. The last thing I heard as I walked out was the sound of breaking glass and Elin's voice, high and desperate, trying to explain something that couldn't be explained away. Outside, the Chicago night air felt clean and cold. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Carson's number. It's done, I said when he answered. Phase 1 complete. How'd she take it? I looked back through the gallery windows at the chaos inside. People clustered in groups, talking animatedly, while Elin stood alone in the center, like the eye of a hurricane. About as well as expected, I said. Time for Phase 2. The next morning, I sat in my home office staring at the evidence spread across my desk, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that painted a picture I'd been too blind to see. Carson had delivered the final batch of documents at 6 a.m., along with coffee and a grim smile. Thought you might need the caffeine, he'd said, setting down a thick folder. This is the last of it. Bank records, phone logs, immigration documents. Your wife's been busy. Now, 3 hours later, I was still processing the scope of Elin's deception. The wire transfers were just the beginning. Every quarter for the past 4 years, exactly $85,000 had moved from our joint business account to a trust in Barcelona, the trust that supported Elena Venton and her family. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the gallery. TC. Tanner. Of course he'd want to talk. According to Carson's research, my half-brother had been taking a 15% commission on every sale that Elin funneled through his auction house. That added up to substantial money over 4 years. I drove to the gallery through morning traffic, my mind churning through possibilities. The building looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less impressive. The scene of last night's revelations seemed almost mundane now, just another storefront in a row of expensive shops. Tanner was waiting inside, pacing near the Rothko display. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. Miles, thank God you're here, he said as I walked in. We need to figure this out. Last night was a disaster. Was it? I locked the door behind me and flipped the sign to closed. I thought it went rather well. You humiliated your wife in front of half the art community in Chicago. Do you have any idea what this could do to the gallery's reputation? I laughed, the sound echoing off the walls. The gallery's reputation? Tanner, we've been selling forgeries. The reputation is the least of our problems. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I pulled out another folder, this one labeled Provenance Fraud. I'm talking about $2.8 million in counterfeit Rothko prints. I'm talking about authentication certificates that were fabricated using my notary credentials. Credentials that somehow found their way to your auction house. Miles, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain this. I opened the folder and spread out the documents. Certificates bearing my signature and seal, authenticating paintings I'd never seen. Sales records showing the pieces moving through Tanner's auction house at inflated prices. Tanner sank into one of the gallery chairs, his head in his hands. She said you knew. Elin told me you were partners in this. Partners? The word tasted bitter. Did she also tell you I was a partner in supporting her Spanish family? Or was that just between you two? I never knew about the children, he said quietly. I swear, Miles. I thought the money was for business expansion. I studied my half-brother's face, looking for signs of deception. We'd never been close, different mothers, different lives. But I'd always thought he was at least honest in his selfishness. Show me your phone, I said. What? Your phone. Text messages between you and Elin. If you're telling the truth, there should be evidence. Reluctantly, Tanner pulled out his device and scrolled through his messages. He handed it over, and I read through months of conversations. Most were about business, auction schedules, buyer contacts, commission splits. But then I found something interesting. A message from 3 weeks ago, right around the time I'd started getting suspicious. Miles is asking questions about the Barcelona transfers. We need to be more careful. And Tanner's reply, maybe it's time to cut him out completely. The Spanish operation doesn't need him. I looked up at my brother. Doesn't need me? For what, exactly? Tanner's face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to go this far. At first, it was just a few pieces. Elin said you were too conservative, that the gallery needed to take bigger risks to compete. So, you decided to forge my signature and sell fake paintings. The paintings weren't fake. They were reproductions. High-quality reproductions sold to people who knew what they were buying, with authentication certificates claiming they were originals. That was Elin's idea. She said rich people liked the story as much as the art. I scrolled further through the messages, finding more damning evidence. References to the Miles problem and discussions about long-term planning. Then I found the message that made my stomach clench. Don't worry about Miles, Elin had written 2 months ago. He won't be a problem much longer. Damon has connections. I showed Tanner the screen. What did she mean by this? His face went white. I don't know. I swear, Miles, I don't know what she meant. But his eyes said otherwise. There was fear there and guilt and something that looked like genuine regret. My phone rang. Carson's number. What do you have? I answered. Bad news. His voice was grim. Your wife filed a missing person report this morning. Claims you threatened her last night and she hasn't seen you since. I'm standing in my own gallery. I know that and you know that. But she's telling police you were unstable, possibly dangerous. She's also claiming the financial documents you showed last night were fabricated. I looked at Tanner, who was listening to every word. Can she make that stick? Not with the evidence we have, but it'll buy her time. Time to move money, destroy records, maybe disappear. What about the Spanish authorities? Working on it, but international cooperation takes time. She could be back in Barcelona before we can freeze her assets there. I ended the call and turned back to Tanner. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me every record of every transaction you and Elin conducted. Every forged certificate. Every fake sale. Every commission payment. Miles, I can't. Yes, you can. Because the alternative is, I turn over what I already have to the FBI and let them sort out who knew what when. Tanner stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The records are at my office. But Miles, you need to know something else. What? Elin's not just running from you. There are other people involved in this. People who won't be happy if their business gets exposed. What people? I don't know names. But some of the buyers, they weren't just art collectors. They were using the paintings to move money, clean investments. If this all comes out, he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I was beginning to understand that my wife's betrayal was bigger than I'd imagined. And more dangerous. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Elin. Stop this nonsense and come home. We can work this out. I showed the message to Tanner. Does this sound like someone who's afraid I've disappeared? He shook his head. She's stalling, buying time. Then we better not give her any more. 3 days later, I had everything I needed. Tanner had provided the records, Carson had traced the money flow, and Veda Talrin, the gallery assistant, had finally agreed to tell the truth about what she'd witnessed. The meeting with Veda had been the breakthrough I needed. She was 24, fresh out of art school, and terrified of losing her job. But she was also honest, which made her a liability in Elon's world. She paid me $50,000, Veda had whispered across the table at a downtown coffee shop. Said it was a bonus for good work, but I knew what it was really for. What did you see? I'd asked. Her switching the authentication certificates. She had duplicates made, then swapped them when the buyers came for pickup. The real certificates went to Spain, the fakes stayed with the paintings. You have proof? Veda had pulled out her phone. I took pictures. I was scared something like this might happen. Now, sitting in the gallery after hours, I reviewed the final pieces of my plan. Aylin thought she was in control, thought she could manipulate the situation from a distance. She'd been avoiding me since the birthday party, communicating only through lawyers and text messages. But I knew her weaknesses. Greed was one, pride was another. And the biggest weakness of all was her belief that she was smarter than everyone around her. My phone rang, the number I'd been expecting. Hello, Ellen. Miles, we need to talk. Her voice was strained, lacking its usual confidence. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me at the gallery tonight, 10 o'clock. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows you were the one behind the forgeries. I have documents with your signature, your seal. Who do you think they'll believe? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I'll be there. At exactly 10 p.m., I heard the key in the gallery lock. Elin entered cautiously, looking around as if she expected an ambush. She wasn't alone. A tall, dark-haired man followed her inside. Damon Vossel, I presumed, her Spanish boyfriend. Miles? She called out. I stepped out from behind the main display. Right here, and you brought a friend. Damon was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to work for anything. He looked around the gallery with obvious disdain. So this is the famous husband, he said in accented English. Smaller than I imagined. And you're the famous boyfriend. Exactly as pathetic as I imagined. Aylin stepped between us. Stop it, both of you. We're here to settle this like adults. Adults? I laughed. Adults don't steal from their spouses to support secret families. I never stole anything. That money was from my share of the business. Your share of a business built on forgeries and fraud? The business you were part of, she shot back. Your signatures on every certificate, Miles. Your notary seal authenticated every sale. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. Say that again. Her eyes narrowed. What? Say again that I was part of the forgery scheme. Go ahead. Damon stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his size. Put the phone away. Or what? You'll call your connections? The ones who were supposed to make sure I wasn't a problem anymore? Both of them froze. Elin's face went pale. That's right, I continued. I know about the plan. The staged accident, the insurance money, the permanent move to Spain, very thorough. You're insane, Elin whispered. Am I? Then explain this. I pulled out another phone, Tanner's phone, which he'd given me along with the records. I played back a recorded conversation between him and Elin from 2 weeks ago. Elin's voice came through clearly. Miles is getting too close. Damon says his people can handle it. Make it look like an accident. Then we collect the insurance and disappear. Tanner's voice. Are you sure about this? He's still my brother. Your brother is going to destroy everything we've built. This is the only way. The recording ended. Elin and Damon stood frozen, staring at the phone. Tanner recorded your conversations, I said. Insurance policy, he called it. Smart man. That proves nothing, Damon said, but his voice lacked conviction. Doesn't it? Because I think the FBI will find it very interesting, especially combined with the financial records, the forged documents, and Veda's testimony about the certificate switching. Veda won't testify, Elin said quickly. I paid her. She stopped, realizing what she'd just admitted. You paid her to lie, I finished. Yes, I know. $50,000 to recant her statement about seeing you swap certificates. She has the text messages proving you coordinated the payment. I walked over to the gallery's main computer and turned on the display screen. Veda's face appeared, along with copies of the text messages between her and Ellen. She recorded a new statement yesterday, I said. Very detailed, very damaging. Ellen looked around desperately as if searching for an escape route. Miles, please. We can work this out. Split everything 50-50 and go our separate ways. 50-50 of what? A business built on fraud? Assets that are about to be seized by federal agents? What are you talking about? I checked my watch. In about 30 minutes, FBI agents will arrive with warrants to search this gallery and your personal accounts. They're also coordinating with Spanish authorities to investigate Elena Venton's immigration status. Damon grabbed Aylin's arm. We need to leave, now. Leave? I moved to block the exit. But we're just getting started. That's when I triggered the gallery's security system. The steel shutters rolled down over the windows, the doors locked automatically, and the alarm began its countdown sequence. What did you do? Aylin demanded. Bought us some time to finish our conversation. I held up the security remote. The system will unlock in 20 minutes. Just enough time for the authorities to arrive. Damon lunged for me, but I'd expected that. I stepped aside and let him crash into the Rothko display. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd just destroyed one of the few authentic pieces in the gallery. That was a $2 million painting, Elin screamed. Actually, it was a $50,000 reproduction, I corrected. Like everything else in here. She stared at me, comprehension dawning. You switched them. Every single piece. The real artwork is safely stored in a warehouse downtown, ready to be returned to their legitimate owners. The security system's voice announced, 15 minutes until unlock sequence. Ellen sank into a chair, the fight going out of her. How long have you known? About the affair? 6 months. About the children? 3 months. About the plan to eliminate me? 2 weeks. Then why didn't you stop you sooner? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. I wanted to document everything, gather evidence, make sure there was no way you could escape the consequences. Damon was trying to force open the shutters, but the steel was 2 inches thick. This is illegal imprisonment. This is justice, I replied. Something you wouldn't recognize. The sound of sirens grew louder outside. Through the small gap under the shutters, I could see flashing lights. 10 minutes until unlock sequence. Elin looked up at me with something that might have been respect. You planned all of this. Every detail. The birthday party revelation was just the opening act. And Tanner? Tanner chose his side a long time ago. Now, he's chosen a new one. The security system counted down. 5 minutes until unlock sequence. Ellen stood up slowly. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. Fraud charges, immigration violations, conspiracy to commit murder. Damon's looking at deportation and prosecution in Spain. And you get everything. I get my life back. The business was built on lies, so there's nothing left to get. 2 minutes until unlock sequence. Outside, I could hear voices, official commands being given. The FBI had arrived right on schedule. 1 minute until unlock sequence. Elin walked over to me, stopping just out of arm's reach. I never loved you, she said quietly. I know, I replied. That's what made this so easy. The security system announced, unlock sequence initiated. The shutters rolled up, the doors clicked open, and federal agents poured into the gallery. Elin and Damon were handcuffed within minutes, their rights read as they were led away. Agent Morrison, the lead investigator, shook my hand. Mr. Heron, thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Thank you for believing me. The evidence was pretty compelling. Your wife made a lot of mistakes. I watched through the window as Elin was placed in the back of a federal vehicle. She looked back at the gallery one last time, her face a mask of rage and defeat. Yes, I said, she did. 6 months later, I stood in the same gallery, but everything had changed. The walls were bare, the expensive fixtures had been removed, and the space echoed with emptiness. Today was the final auction, the legitimate one, where the real artwork would be sold to pay back defrauded buyers and cover legal fees. Carson joined me near the window, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this? Thanks. I took the cup and sipped the bitter brew. Any word from Spain? Elin's trial starts next month. The Spanish authorities are taking the immigration fraud very seriously. Elena Venton's visa was obtained through false documentation. And Damon, deported back to Colombia. Turns out Spain wasn't his first stop in Europe. He's wanted for similar schemes in 3 other countries. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of closure. What about the children? Foster care in Barcelona. Ellen's sister's trying to get custody, but it's complicated by the fraud charges. That part still bothered me. The children were innocent victims in all of this, caught up in their mother's web of lies. I'd set up a trust fund for them, anonymously, to ensure they'd have something when they came of age. Tanner's sentencing is next week, Carson continued. What's he looking at? 2 to 5 years, probably less with his cooperation. He made a deal with prosecutors. My half-brother had indeed chosen the right side eventually. His testimony had been crucial in securing Elon's conviction on the fraud charges. He'd also provided evidence of the murder conspiracy, though Ellen's lawyers had managed to get that reduced to conspiracy to commit assault. Mr. Heron, a young woman approached us. I recognized her as the new assistant district attorney handling the case. Ms. Chen, I wanted to let you know that the final restitution payments will be processed next month. Between the asset seizures and the auction proceeds, we'll be able to compensate about 80% of the fraud victims. And the other 20%? Civil suits against Mrs. Heron's Spanish assets. It'll take time, but we're optimistic. She handed me an envelope. Also, this came for you through official channels, from Spain. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter written in Ellen's precise handwriting. Miles, I suppose you think you've won. You've destroyed my life, separated me from my children, and ruined everything I worked to build. You probably feel very satisfied with yourself. But here's what you don't understand. I never needed you. The gallery, the business, the success. I built all of that. You were just along for the ride, too blind to see what was happening right in front of you. The only thing I regret is not finishing what Damon started. You were always weak, always content to let others make the important decisions. That weakness is why you'll never be truly successful. I hope you're happy with your empty gallery and your empty life. You traded a partnership with someone who could have made you rich beyond your dreams for the satisfaction of revenge. That makes you a fool. Elena. I read the letter twice, then handed it to Carson. He scanned it quickly and shook his head. She still doesn't get it, he said. No, she doesn't. I took the letter back and folded it carefully. She thinks this was about money. What was it about? I looked around the empty gallery one more time, remembering how it had looked 8 months ago, full of beautiful lies, expensive deceptions, and the woman I'd thought I loved. Truth, I said finally. It was about truth. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code, Barcelona. Mr. Heron, this is Maria Santos, Elena's sister. I wanted to thank you for the trust fund you established for the children. They will never know it came from you, but I wanted you to know how grateful we are. I showed the message to Carson. How did she find out? Trust fund lawyers aren't always as discreet as they claim to be. I typed back, take care of them. They deserve better than the hand they were dealt. The response came quickly, they do, and so did you. As we walked toward the exit, I felt lighter than I had in months. The gallery was empty, my marriage was over, and my business was destroyed. But for the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was and what I stood for. So what's next? Carson asked as we stepped onto the sidewalk. I got a job offer from the Art Institute, Authentication Department, helping them identify forgeries and fraud. Sounds perfect. It is. Honest work, helping people avoid the kind of deception I lived through. We walked toward our cars in comfortable silence. The Chicago afternoon was crisp and clear, the kind of day that made you believe in new beginnings. Miles, Carson called as I reached my car. For what it's worth, I think you handled this exactly right. Even the dramatic gallery lockdown? Especially the dramatic gallery lockdown. Sometimes people need to be trapped with the truth before they'll admit it. I drove home through the city streets, past the neighborhoods where Aylin and I had once walked together, past the restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries and business successes. All of it felt like someone else's life now, like a story I'd heard but never lived. At home, I found one final surprise waiting for me. A package on my doorstep, no return address. Inside was a small canvas, maybe 8 inches by 10 inches, and a note. Mr. Heron, I painted this for you. It's not worth anything financially, but I wanted you to have something real after all the fake things you've dealt with. Thank you for giving me the courage to tell the truth. Veda. The painting was simple but beautiful. A sunrise over Lake Michigan, painted with obvious skill and genuine emotion. I hung it on the wall in my living room, right where I could see it every morning when I woke up. It was the first authentic piece of art I'd owned in years. That night, I sat on my couch looking at Veda's painting and thinking about truth and lies, about justice and revenge, about the difference between winning and being right. Ellen had been wrong about one thing. I didn't feel satisfied with revenge. I felt satisfied with truth. The revenge had just been the delivery method. My phone rang one last time. Tanner's number. Miles, I wanted to call before my sentencing tomorrow. How are you holding up? Better than I deserve. Listen, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know I'm grateful. You could have destroyed me completely, but you gave me a chance to make it right. We're family, Tanner. Complicated, screwed up family, but family. Yeah, we are. He paused. When I get out, maybe we can start over. Do something legitimate this time. I'd like that. After I hung up, I realized that was the first conversation I'd had with my brother in years that hadn't involved lies or deception or hidden agendas. It felt good. Outside my window, the city lights stretched toward the horizon, full of possibilities and second chances. I had a new job starting Monday, a clean slate, and for the first time in my adult life, no one was lying to me about anything important. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything.